It looks like it's up to you, Mark. And so we're welcoming Mark Berkson.
Yeah.
And he spoke to us last Cannamaste as well, actually, about the cannabis in ritual and religion. And he's going to come back onto that, but also to talk about the Sufi traditions, which he did not discuss last time. And Mickey has something to say?
Of ugly Islamophobia, and it often involves equating this rich, diverse tradition, which has close to 1.5 millennium of history and varied cultural expressions in every part of the world, with extremism, right? As if that's what it is. But even people who avoid that version of ignorance, they still often emphasize the aspects of Islam that are connected with geopolitics. So a lot of students take my Islam class because they're interested in learning about what's going on politically in the Muslim world, which is good if it gets them there. But one of the things I love the most about teaching Islam is when we get to the unit on Sufism, which is often described as the mystical tradition within Islam. This is a deeply spiritual, devotional, contemplative form of Islam. And learning about the Sufis, reading their philosophy and poetry, is often when the beauty and power of Islam is glimpsed. And this is when students are most likely to fall in love with Islam. So before I talk about the Sufis and about cannabis, there's a key point I want to make. And to me, this is one of the most important lessons I've learned in my study of comparative religion. And that is that differences within religions are as great as, if not greater than, the differences among religions. So I think that is so important, I am going to repeat it. The differences within any given religion are as great as, if not greater than, the difference among religions, all right? So in other words, I'm just saying that every religion is tremendously diverse. And on any issue, from the role of women to conceptions of God, any issue, there's a continuum of views, right? A wide range with extremes on both sides. And there's often more in common between members of different religions who are on the same part of a continuum than between members of the same religion on different parts of a continuum, right? So for example, a patriarchal conservative Christian will have more in common with a patriarchal conservative Muslim or Hindu than with an egalitarian progressive Christian. And that person, the egalitarian progressive Christian, is going to have more in common with an egalitarian progressive Jew or Muslim or Hindu, right? It's what kind of a person you are within that religion, not what religion you are, right? So it goes with cannabis. There's a cannabis continuum in most religions, and it ranges from people who condemn its use on the one hand, to those who believe it to be a spiritual sacrament on the other. So most religions, the answer of what do they think of cannabis is, it's a range through history, right? And in different cultures, except for the Rastas, everybody there, they love cannabis. But most religions, right, there's a range. And as you would probably imagine, those on the cannabis using part of the continuum tend to have certain characteristics. Their religion is more love-based rather than legalistic, more pluralistic, more tolerant and open. So I'm going to briefly describe how cannabis has been used among Sufis, and then discuss the features of Sufism that I believe resonate with the teachings that cannabis provides. So we can connect the herb resonant properties and values across religions. So in other words, some of the things we're going to see in the Sufis today, we talked a bit about in the other traditions last time. So here we go. Who are the Sufis? Well, the scholar of religion, Houston Smith, called Sufis the impatient ones. He explained that they do not want to wait until they die to experience God. They want a direct experience of God here and now, moment by moment, day by day, in this very life. This emphasis on the experience of God has led many to call Sufism the mystical tradition within Islam, and that's certainly an accurate term, because one aspect of the path is the attainment of this profound connection with God. And they do it through practices like rhythmic repetition of certain phrases and words, or even the word Allah, or silent meditation, or certain forms of movement and breathing. Sufis use music, right? Often with trance-inducing drumming, mesmerizing flutes, as well as dance, like the whirling dervishes. The goal is to enable a direct experience of the divine. But there are other terms besides mystical that can be used to describe Sufism. Sufism is known as the path of purity. In Arabic, tasawwuf. It means the purification of the heart. And when the heart is purified, it yearns to ease the suffering of others, to spread joy and love. And this manifests in service to others. Many Sufi orders are dedicated to social justice and humanitarian projects. The great Sufi saint Ali al-Hujvari said, "Knowledge without action is not knowledge." But above all else, Sufism is a path of love, the deepest kind of love there is, a love of God that overflows unto all creation without discrimination, and a love that is exemplified in the lives of certain people who become known as the Sufi saints. So let's begin with a quick look at two Sufi saints associated with cannabis. And it's not surprising that one is South Asian and one is Persian. The use of cannabis is far more common in certain parts of the Muslim world, like South Asia, than in other parts like the Arab Middle East, although it's everywhere. But Sufi influence has always been strong in South Asia. So what are today modern India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, right? Throughout Islamic history there. There's a shrine in Lahore, Pakistan, and that's a center for Sufi practice, Lahore. And it's dedicated to the 17th century saint, Baba Shah Jamal. And he was known for a practice, a particular ritual, and it involved drumming, dancing, and the consumption of hashish. So Sufis would often eat or drink cannabis. Because many Sufis were wandering mendicants, they then spread the use of hash to all different cultures and communities, right, as a dimension of religious practice. So one scholar described cannabis for Sufis like Baba Shah Jamal as, quote, an avenue towards the divine. The second saint is Qutb ad-Din Haydar, who is a 13th century Persian Sufi saint, for whom cannabis was also part of the spiritual path. Now, the story told about him is that he followed a more ascetic path until he discovered wild cannabis growing, and he ate it, and he found it to be a positive aid to his spiritual practice. The following statement is attributed to him, and this is great. I really love this. Quote, "God Almighty has granted you, as a special favor, an awareness of the virtues of this leaf, so that your use of it will dissipate the cares that obscure your souls and free your spirits from everything that might hamper them. Keep carefully then the deposit he has confided in you," unquote. So cannabis in parts of the Muslim world become known as the wine of Haydar, after him, Qutb ad-Din Haydar. And you find cannabis praised in some Sufi poetry. There is a North Indian Urdu poet, Nasir. He wrote about what he called sabzi, the green one. And as we talked about last time, cannabis is often blended into a drink in South Asia called bhang. And Nasir writes, quote, "Compared with bhang, spirits are naught. Leave all things, thou fool, drink bhang." Now there's also this 18th century pharmacopoeia, and it brings together Arab and Greek knowledge. It's called the Maksan. And as with pharmacopoeia in early India and China, cannabis is in there. And it's really illuminating to see the names they give cannabis. The joy giver, the sky flyer, the heavenly guide, the poor man's heaven, the soother of grief. Now, before I move to the final part of my talk, which is the worldview and values that form sort of cannabis-infused Islam, Sufi, in Sufi form, I want to read you a little segment from a report by the Indian Hemp Commission. It was issued in 1894, and it studied the effects of cannabis in India, and it looked at its religious use, including among the Sufis. So basically, the British government wanted to figure out, what are we going to do about hemp, right, about cannabis in India? So they commissioned this group, and they wrote this extensive report. It's over 3,000 pages long, and it has the testimony of over 1,200 people. And one part of it is awesome, okay? This particular recommendation by the Indian Hemp Commission. I can't believe this was written by a commissioner, but he really understood the religious usage. Quote, "To forbid or even seriously to restrict the use of so gracious an herb as hemp would cause widespread suffering and annoyance. and to large bands of worshipped ascetics, deep-seated anger. It would rob the people of a solace in discomfort, of a cure in sickness, of a guardian whose gracious protection saves them from the attacks of evil influences, and whose mighty power makes the devotee of the victorious able to rest in the eternal, until the eternal, possessing him body and soul, frees him from the haunting of self and receives him into the ocean of being. The Muslim mystic reveres Bhang as the lengthener of life and the freer from the bonds of self. Bhang brings union with the divine spirit, unquote. Written by a commission. It was amazing. So the last section here is I just want to emphasize what is it about Sufi Islam and what cannabis teaches, right, in the tradition. And one of the most important things is oneness. One of the most important concepts in all of Islam is tawheed, oneness. It's usually thought of as the oneness of God, right? The strict monotheism. And it certainly means that. But the oneness of God means the oneness of creation. It means to experience the world without boundaries and without divisions, to experience the world with an open heart, with an outpouring of love for humanity, for all of creation. In the second surah of the Quran, it reads, "Wheresoever you turn, there is the face of God." But how does one dissolve the boundaries of separation? Well, an important concept in Sufism is fana, annihilation. So Sufis emphasize the need to let go of or annihilate the ego and the self-centeredness that act as barriers to a deeper connection with God through selfless love. Sufi insights are often expressed through poetry. The best known poet is the 13th century Sufi poet Jalal ad-Din Rumi. So one of the best ways to encounter the beauty of Islam and Sufism is through his poetry. So for example, on this particular point, he wrote this: "If you could get rid of yourself just once, the secret of secrets would open to you. The face of the unknown, hidden beyond the universe, would appear on the mirror of your perception." So another theme in Sufism is the closeness of God. In the Quran, as in the Bible, and a lot of Abrahamic texts, a lot of emphasis is put on God's transcendence, right? God is radically transcendent in some other dimension. But Sufis highlight another important theme, God's immanence, God's closeness to us and presence in us. So in Surah 50, it says, God says, quote, "We are nearer to the human being than their jugular vein." Rumi expresses this in the poem Be Melting Snow, which reminds us that when we are looking for God, there's no need to go outside. So this is a short poem. When you look for God, God is in the look of your eyes, in the thought of looking, nearer to you than yourself or things that have happened to you. There's no need to go outside. Be melting snow. Wash yourself of yourself. Finally, what one needs to do in Sufi practice is to pay attention, to remember, to be mindful. Now, mindfulness is often associated with Buddhism, but it also has a very strong theme in Sufism. In Surah 24, it says that people of true faith are, quote, "those whom neither trade nor commerce distract from the remembrance of God," unquote. Sufi poet Abu Sa'id says that, quote, "the true saint goes in and out among the people, buys and sells in the marketplace, marries and takes part in social life, and never forgets God for a single moment." Anyone who practices mindfulness meditation will resonate with this statement of Hujwiri. He writes, quote, "The Sufi is he whose thought keeps pace with his foot. He is entirely present. His soul is where his body is where his soul where his foot where his soul is," unquote. Mindfulness of God with every step you take, right? Cannabis is the herb of mindfulness. So, in conclusion, let's just briefly revisit the word religion. which we reflected on last week. Religion at its worst is about creating boundaries and separation and divisions, right? The good and evil, saved and damned, us and them. Religion at its best is about dissolving boundaries, revealing a oneness that underlies and connects all of the diverse manifestations of creation. This is one of the lessons of cannabis in all religions, and it is one of the most important themes in Sufism. Sufis show us a way of seeing past all division, encouraging us to put aside the labels and banners that divide us. Rumi writes, "Look for someone else to tend the shop. I'm out of the image-making business. There's only love, only the holder the flag fits into, no flag." Thank you.
And we thank you. That was pretty interesting. You know, I really, Mark, I really connect to that whole soul and foot connection that you have there, expressing with the Sufis, because I love to walk barefooted and just feel the world and know where I am. And I believe there was a Indian tradition that said to a person who wears moccasins, the whole world feels like leather. More so even when you add asphalt and cement and other things we put under our feet nowadays. And so I just love to walk in the earth, you know, when I can. And I felt that. Well, thank you so much for that whole presentation there.
And Swami.
And Swami has something to say.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I do want to say one of my very first teachers on my path was Pir Vilayat Inayat Khan, a Sufi master, and his father, Hazrat Inayat Khan, is a well-revered Sufi saint, and he's well known for his statement. Well, they begin everything with "Towards the One, united with all the illuminated souls of all time," and that's how you begin your meditation. And the key thing that well, there's a Sufi group that started in Marin County with Murshid Sam Lewis, and that's connected to the Pir Vilayat Khan. They are still operative. Sufi Sam, as he was known, created all these wonderful dances that really do take you into an ecstatic experience. And we had a meditation camp in Arizona one year where that's all we did for 10 days with good food is yoga and meditation and dancing. And it was really quite exalting. Yeah, definitely put me on my path, because that was when I worked on the movie Sunseed, which was based on Sufism, but also talked about Hinduism and Judaism and Buddhism and so on. And it's kind of an encyclopedic film that's called Sunseed. If you're still interested, the journey, you can see it online if you wish. And thanks again, Mark. And the Sufis are just a wonderful group of people, and they very are. Sufi Sam, for example, used to dance like Krishna with a flute, and all these beautiful women dancing with him. It's really quite cute and charming in some ways, and inspiring as well.
Is there some relationship between the dervishes and the Sufis, Mark?
Yes. Okay, so I'll do a quick answer to that, but then I have a question for the Swami, if that's okay.
Yes, sure.
Okay. Yes. So there are many Sufi orders. There are brotherhoods and sisterhoods. And there are actually also, especially in the West, especially in America, orders that are just, anybody could come, men and women together practice. But in Asia, traditionally, you had men's and women's orders, brotherhoods and sisterhoods. And they had lineages. I mean, that's one of the things I'm going to ask the Swami about, but lineages of masters. And basically, the lineage you trace back goes back to the Prophet Muhammad. I mean, who really, what was that first experience and everything after that except for mystical, right? I mean, a direct experience of God. So for them, it's the experiential part is really crucial. And so that one of the orders is the Mevlevi, and they go, so this is the order Rumi was actually connected with. And so they have this particular beautiful dance, which is why they became known as the whirling dervishes. And just, I got to see this when I was in Turkey, and it's really quite powerful because just let me do this for 20 seconds. It'll be fast. But all right, so they come into the building, they're wearing the skirts, right? Like, so when the spinning goes there, it's really whirling around, and they have hats. So a certain clothing associates you with the order, and they start the dance constricted, right? Like the ego, the alienated, right? And then as they walk past their sheikh, their peer, who's the guru, right? Going back, right? Who's so important to them, they begin opening up, their bodies open up. And then they have one hand towards the earth and one hand towards the heavens, and then they begin spinning. I don't know how long you've ever spun, but I will tell you, they spun for a long, I mean, like 20 minutes, I don't know, half an hour. And this is the first mode of consciousness alteration that people experience. Children learn to alter states of consciousness by spinning. It's why they enjoy spinning and then fall down and get up and spinning. They realize they can do that, which of course just tells you the absolutely primal, like their biological need to alter consciousness. So anyway, yes, it's a beautiful dance, and the music, and it's very trance-inducing in a way. And then they all spin and orbit the sheikh, the guru, right in the middle. So it's quite beautiful. Which lets me, if I can ask the Swami a question, and then you guys can open this up too. Other people can answer this from their own direction. The person he'd mentioned, Pir Vilayat Khan, I mean, I have these books that collect wisdom from Sufi masters, and he's in there. I mean, there's people that go back, right, centuries and centuries. So to have modern masters in there, right, it's really cool. And so you have a connection much more closely than me with one of these great masters. And I think one of the things that's interesting in Sufism, and all these traditions, Zen has it too, where it's really much a mind-to-mind transition. It's a direct relationship. The sheikh, the master, connects you with the path. Who that person is crucial. It's not just what they're teaching, it's their personal example, it's who they are. And we're very rarely in the presence of saints. Most of us, I mean, no, that's probably not true. You guys are kind of saints in the cannabis tradition, right? So like, we've got proximity to, like, but in some of the more mainstream spiritual traditions, I just am curious, Swami, what kind of the impact in terms of like who he was and what it was, what that meant to you and the impact it had. And then for other people, if there are people in your life who you look at and you're like, that person embodies the tradition and embodies the values that are, what I'm aspiring to. I'd love to hear about that, because in this world, that is what we need now, what we truly need. We're not getting it from our political leaders for the most part. So who are the people to you? So Swami, just what you know of Pir Vilayat Khan, I'd be interested.
Well, yeah, Pir Vilayat Khan was a really wonderful man. His son has taken over the order, and he got it from his father. His father, Hazrat Inayat Khan, married an American woman and produced Pir Vilayat Khan. And then he married an American woman, and this is this kind of lineage of that. Sufi Sam is quite an character also. You should check him out. He would say, through joy and ecstasy, we will have this experience of the divine, and that's what the dances were all about. And, it would definitely appeal to the hippie mentality as it came in the 70s and so on. And they definitely lived it. They had a wonderful community. And just one little, when I was in India traveling around, Dai Swami and so on, one of my friends, a fraternity brother who made this movie Sunseed, came to India and met me. And we went to the Dargah, as it's called, in New Delhi, of Hazrat Inayat Khan, his Dargah. And he's considered a great saint and written many books and so on. And so Amartad and I sat on either side of this Dargah tomb, this marble place with wind screens and the whole thing covered in rose petals, and just this amazing feeling, and actually a very, very heavy neighborhood. And I'm walking in looking like a total Hindu in orange and so on, going to this Muslim temple, this Muslim set, and everything, once we got in, it was total peace. And while we're there, I had this vision, surrounding behind us were the leaders of all of the world's religions in every different category all over the place, and they were all in a giant circle behind us. And each one of them was chanting their main thing, whether it was Amen or Om or Allah or whatever it was, that chant sound, which was sort of characteristic of the vibe of their religion. And it all sounded, and to begin with, it was cacophony. And as the vision progressed and these rose petals infused everything, and this vision of all the world's leaders, of all the world's religions in every aspect, it became one giant single note, this chord that was a resonating chord, and it just vibrated out. And so I go to that sometimes as a thing of what the world needs from time to time, is that all of us singing just our own personal note of our own spirit, and eventually it becomes one great magnificent chord.
Yeah, that's great.
Wow.
Cannamaste. And
Namaste.
as Mark said, this is really open for all, and we had a longer type of topic from before or something. This is an open discussion, but if we want to kind of stay with what Mark was talking about for a moment, or actually in a way, just kind of spinning off from what Swami was saying there too, because you used the word resonant. And to me, it's always interesting about resin on the plant, having the cannabinoids, and resonation being the vibration of the universe, and sound and vision and all these other things that are going on, and the connection between vibrations. And I know it's just a linguistic similarity, but it, I kind of feel like that sometimes these coincidences like that happen for a reason. When you have a homonym that shows up, like the cannabosum and the cannabis, I mean, it's kind of a logical connection that you see there. So anybody, we invite other people. You can either ask Mark a question or just bring in whatever topic you want.
I'd like to ask Swami a question.
Please.
Yes, Swami, did you ever walk with Joe Miller?
No, I actually didn't walk with Joe Miller, but it's curious that you bring him up, because in this film I keep talking about Sunseed, he's in that film as one of the people, and he's there, and he makes a statement at Sufi Sam's funeral, which was quite a sad but same exalting play, and he just comes out and he just says, the truth is one.
Yeah.
Right? And we all live it, and we all have it.
He was a beautiful guy, him and his wife, and would walk with him, I think it was every Sunday there through Golden Gate Park. And Shabda Khan is my son's stepfather. So, and they're all in Sunseed, and Zuleika, and I've known all those guys for 40 or 50 years now. But it's really quite interesting. Love hearing about it.
Swami, that's Sunseed.
I'd love to see it all again. Go ahead, Mike.
That's sunseed.org. Is that the website for it?
Yeah, and there's also a re-release of the film called Sunseed: The Journey. But sunseed.org will get you there. And yeah, it includes Baba Ramdas, Swami Satchidananda, Yogi Bhajan, Pir Vilayat Khan, Sufi Sam, Roshi Suzuki, I'm probably Shlomo Karlbach. I mean, it's just an encyclopedia of the spiritual movement that young people were doing in 1970, 71. And in the filming, we went to India and Nepal, did Tibetan Buddhism and so on. It's quite entertaining in some ways.
Well, we're having a post-church screening. Everybody at their own home.
Yeah.
And music.
That's good. What was that website?
Yeah, music by the Sufi choir. There's music by the Sufi choir and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's Tibetan Buddhists, so on.
Did you say sunseed.com or org?
Brian put it in the chat. It's in the chat.
You put it in already? Okay.
Yeah, it's in there. And by the way, I also put today's service guide, this program, that people can download the PDF, and also the lyrics to Let It Be, which we'll be sharing shortly.
All right, and we're gonna ask Swami to do a resonant chant with us at the end, but we're still in the discussion right now, but hoping you will do that for us to guide us again, Swami.
Okay, when Mark finished, it seemed like a lot of hands were going up, so I'd like to know who has a question. Arya, unmute yourself, please.
Up here. Hi. Okay.
Okay, there you
I just wanted to say that was fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciated that. It was super well thought out, and you took us through stages, and I thought it was really, really good. And I love the part about, first of all, I'm a Tibetan Buddhist myself and studied religion in school. And then my roommate has become, she was a Nepali Buddhist and now is a Hindu. Sorry, not a Hindu, I'm talking about a Muslim. She's converted. And so I've been kind of going through that process of relearning about Islam with her. And so it's been fascinating. And I just loved how you tied everything in together, and it really resonated with me. And thank you so much.
Yeah, I was going
Especially
to ask.
in the
You felt like you got some.
in the mindfulness.
That brings me up a kind of a question that I've had Mark about the relationship between mindfulness and intention, because it seems like there is one, because when you make your intention, you're being mindful within a certain given context. I don't know if you have any thoughts that you want to throw out in either one of those topics of mindfulness or intention, or any connectivity between the two. Anybody, by the way, you know, Mark is not going on the spot. Anybody who has thoughts on this is an open question.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone else had anything they want to talk about too, I talked already, so I didn't want to necessarily occupy too much space here, but I'm happy to throw an answer out if you're interested. But if anyone else has one, you should talk first. All right, well, please, Jane has something.
Mark, that was just terrific. And I was wondering, how can I attend the full course?
I won't even plug. I could email something to Chris and Vicky if you want. But I have online stuff, but we don't have to do it here. So let me just give two quick thoughts based on what Ari and Chris said. One of the things that I noticed with the discussion of mindfulness and Sufism is sometimes people are surprised to find out that there's that, right? And that's why I was talking about things that are found across traditions, right? But among commonly minded people within those different traditions, they find all this common cause. And I think one of the things I love about the Sufis and about really mystics and poets, the mystic poets in just about every tradition, is that they have a beautiful vision of pluralism. I think that vision, this notion that truth can be found in many different traditions, that there isn't one exclusive path, and they don't divide it into the saved and damned or true and false. They look for the truth everywhere, and it's really sometimes conveyed most powerfully in the poem. So just a very quick one, because I didn't get to talk about this poem, but you probably have all heard of some version of the story of the blind man and the elephant. Yeah, when they're people who haven't seen an elephant are trying to feel around, right? Well, this goes back. This is an ancient story, but Rumi writes a particular version of this story. And the twist in it, the way he ends, is the crucial part. So it's not a blind man and an elephant. It's called Elephant in the Dark. But the initial part of it's the same. A bunch of people who've never seen an elephant go into a room. It's dark. They reach out. They're starting to kind of feel, what's this animal? So Rumi goes through it. He's really funny about it. He goes through all the different parts, right? Like, oh, an elephant is a big, wagging back and forth fan animal, because the guy's touching the ear. No, it's a big hose animal. No, it's a big, hard pointy thing, right? Because it's the tusk, whatever. So he describes all that. Oh, and then he says, the guy who described the tusk, he was the most proud of himself, right? He was sure he knew what it was. He gets to the very end and he says, because each one of us feels only a part and we take it for the whole, right? We never get the full picture of what it is. He says, but if each of us held a candle and we all went in together, only then could we see it. And that's the move he makes in his story. It's not that you have all these different religions and we have to tolerate each other. It's that we need each other, because each one is only this partial view. You have to have the experience of all these different people in their quest to understand what is ultimately infinite. So an elephant's big, right? But the divine is infinite. So you're never going to finish. But at least all these different perspectives, right, give you that sense of a larger notion of what it is. And so I really like that. And I love the pluralism you find in Sufism. The other thing, just real fast, I probably said enough already, but just super quick on Chris's thing. It's a very interesting thing is how much is intentionality involved in mindfulness practice. Many different ways. I mean, there's, for example, setting an intention when you practice. It can be very helpful And Jane does that really well, right? Setting the space for the practice and directing your mind. That's intention. And there are lots of forms of meditation that are directed. So intentionally focusing on a particular phenomenon, right? The breath is one of those things, right? You can have an intention to stay with your breath or to experience your body in certain ways. All those stuff, those things are true, right? But at the same time, and sometimes this requires, there's a little paradox there, but it can, you know, the meditation masters say you totally can resolve these things. But at the same time, there's totally open awareness, non-directed, whatever arises is accepted. So in a sense, you can have an intention to go into that space. But once you're in that space, even the intention itself, even the attempt to direct itself can be let go of. And you can sort of, and that's, it can be very difficult for some people. The intentionality helps, right, to direct. But there is this just pure, open, spacious awareness. And it's not imposing anything, even in including intention on the world. It is a letting the world arise, right? And just being a witness to it. And there can be a profound equanimity in that. That's all I'll say right now.
Here, here. Well, thank you so much for being here, sharing today's Cannamaste with us, Mark.